Sometimes, the truth doesn't arrive through what we see with our eyes, but through a single phone call that turns our entire world upside down. My youngest son, Lucas, a pilot, called me mid-flight, his voice trembling with urgency. "Mom, something's not right. I just saw Elena boarding a flight to France, and I'm holding her passport in my hand." I froze, because just minutes earlier I had heard her voice echo down the staircase. "Mom, I'm going to take a quick shower." My body went rigid, my heartbeat scattered into chaos. Then who was the woman on that plane? Or worse, who was the woman inside my house? That's when I heard slow, deliberate footsteps behind me, followed by a voice I knew too well, yet suddenly felt bone-chilling. "You're back, Mom? I'm so glad you came home." Today's story will take you from innocent suspicion to a shattering truth I never could have imagined. If you want to uncover the terrifying secret hidden behind the smile of a seemingly perfect daughter-in-law, watch this video to the end. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment letting me know where in the world are you watching from. It was a quiet, drizzling afternoon. Outside the window, the rain tapped steadily against the glass, like a warning drumbeat of something unusual on the horizon. Inside, the house was wrapped in the dim, flickering light of the old kitchen neon, casting everything in a cold, uneasy glow. I was gently wiping the dust from a family photo on the shelf, a wedding portrait of my eldest son, Nathan, and his beautiful but distant wife, Elena. As my fingers traced the glass, a strange feeling crept over me. And then, suddenly the shrill ring of the rotary phone pierced through the silence, loud and jarring like it was slicing through the rain. Startled, I wiped my hands on a worn cloth and picked up the receiver. It was the voice I loved most in this world, Lucas, my youngest son. "Hey, Mom," he said brightly. "Just calling to check in. I'm on a layover at Charles de Gaulle." Just that one sentence, it was like a warm hug wrapping around a mother's heart. Lucas was my pride and joy, a young pilot flying across the skies, living the dream he had since childhood. We exchanged a few words about his health and his route, his laughter lifting the heaviness of the gray sky around me. But then, his voice faltered. He spoke again, slower this time, like choosing his words carefully. "Mom, Elena's at home, right?" I glanced up the staircase. Just a few minutes ago, I'd heard her voice drift down casually. "Mom, I'm going to my room for a bit. Don't call me, okay?" She was wearing that pale blue silk dress with embroidered flowers, the one she saved for special occasions, not the kind you'd wear to shower on a rainy afternoon. I remembered it clearly. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied firmly. She just went upstairs. On the other end, silence. A long, heavy pause. I could even hear the muffled sound of airport announcements in the background. "Mom," Lucas finally said, his voice lowering, "I just found a passport near the boarding gate. I was going to hand it over to staff, but when I opened it, it was hers. Elena's. Her name, her photo, it's her, Mom." My brow furrowed. This had to be a mistake. I forced a nervous smile, trying to laugh it off. "Oh, Lucas, you must have seen someone else. I just saw her. She's wearing that blue dress she went upstairs not 10 minutes ago." But Lucas's tone had changed. He was now putting the pieces together. "I went down to the passenger deck, Mom. I swear. I saw her sitting in business class, next to a very well-dressed man. They were whispering, and their hands, they were touching, like a real couple." That sentence hit like a blade to the chest. My hands trembled, my heart pounded uncontrollably. But before I could even form a response, upstairs, the sound of the shower abruptly stopped. The floorboards creaked. Footsteps, each one scraping across my nerves like sandpaper. The bedroom door creaked open, and then that same soft voice floated down the staircase. "Mom, who was that on the phone? You sound a little shaken." I whipped around. My trembling hands dropped the photo frame. It crashed to the floor. The glass shattered. The wedding photo slid out, tilting on the cold tile floor beneath my feet. And when I looked up, Elena was standing on the stairs, her hair still damp, a faint, innocent smile on her lips, as if nothing had happened at all. In the receiver, Lucas was still speaking. "Mom, I swear she's standing right in front of me, on the flight to Paris." And me? I stood frozen between two opposite realities, gripping the receiver as if it were the only thing anchoring me, while the truth began to crack, like the first fracture in a mirror, and we all thought was flawless. Dusk descended like a smear of blood across the sky. The light inside the house slowly faded, painting everything in a haunting shade of ash gray. The living room bulb flickered, producing a soft, crackling sound. A draft slipped through the window, causing the curtains to sway gently, like an invisible hand had brushed past them. I clutched the rotary phone tightly, the click-clack of the dial echoing through the quiet house like a warning drumbeat, tightening the fear in my chest. It was just a wrong number, sweetheart. The words escaped my lips, my voice strained, like something was choking me from within. I hurried out of the dining room, slipping into the living room before Araceli could glance down the stairs. Her hair was still damp, her expression a mix of surprise and subtle suspicion. I closed the door behind me, my hands trembling so badly I nearly knocked over the framed photo on the side table, a wedding portrait of Nathan and Araceli, now leaning askew, mirroring the unease inside me. Bringing the receiver back to my ear, I lowered my voice to a whisper, almost a plea. "Lucas." I just heard her voice, clear as day. She went upstairs to shower. "Are you absolutely certain you didn't mistake someone else for her?" Silence again. The space between us stretched, suspended in something cold and incomprehensible. All I could hear was the airport intercom in the background, muffled and distant, and the strained breathing of my youngest son. "Mom," he said slowly, each word dropping like lead into my ears. "I'm looking at her right now. She's just a few steps away from me, and if this is some kind of mistake, then it's the most terrifying one of my life." My throat went dry. I couldn't speak. I slowly hung up the phone. The room suddenly felt colder, as if someone had thrown open the gates of hell. The air grew thick and suffocating, pressing down on my chest until I could hardly breathe. I collapsed onto the couch, my hands trembling on my lap, heart pounding so violently I feared it might shatter at any second. If Araceli was here, then who was on that plane? And if the woman on the plane was the real Araceli, then who had just shared my roof? I hadn't even begun to make sense of it all when I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Araceli appeared now, dressed in a loose, gray knit dress, still damp around the shoulders. A flicker of confusion passed through me. Hadn't she been wearing a silk dress blue, with embroidered flowers just moments earlier? She smiled gently, her gaze brushing over me warm, yet strangely detached. Then came her familiar voice. "Mom, I need to step out for a bit. It's still early. Do you want me to bring anything back?" I looked at her, trying to steady my voice despite the burning dryness in my throat. "Yes, bring me some tomatoes." She nodded and reached for a small floral tote bag, not her usual woven one. It looked old, out of place, like it belonged to someone else entirely. I stood at the door, watching as her figure stretched long across the damp stone path, glowing red under the bleeding sunset. She stepped through the gate and disappeared into the growing shadows. I remained rooted in place. It felt as if my soul was suspended between two worlds, one built of memory, the other warped by a horrifying present. I didn't believe Lucas would lie. My son wasn't the type to invent stories. He was sincere, intuitive, and never gave me a reason to doubt him. But the woman who had just left this house, I had lived with her for years, shared meals, exchanged heartfelt conversations. How could she be a stranger? And then, a chilling thought sliced through me like a blade. What if, all these years, within the very walls I believed to be the safest in the world, there had been a secret festering in the shadows, a truth so dark, so well hidden, that I, an aging, trusting woman, had never seen it coming? Evening fell on the quiet neighborhood in suburban Phoenix. Rain tapped softly on the rooftops, each drop striking the window pane like a whispered warning I wasn't yet ready to face. The sky was a heavy shade of lead, an ominous backdrop, and the dim yellow light in the living room couldn't dispel the creeping cold that settled deep into my bones. I, Evelyn Brooks, a 5-year-old widow, sat in an old wooden chair that groaned beneath me with every slight movement, like brittle bones cracking in the silence. In my hands rested a worn leather-bound journal, its spine frayed and its pages yellowed with time, once a record of peaceful days spent with children and grandchildren. Now, I didn't write. I simply held it tightly, as though clutching a truth that was slipping through my fingers. Lucas's phone call still echoed in my mind, every word carving ice into my chest. "Mom, I'm looking at her right now. If this is a mistake, it's the most horrifying one of my life." I raised my eyes to the family photos on the wall, Nathan and Elena on their wedding day, little Caleb learning to walk, and Lucas beaming in his first pilot's uniform. These images once warmed my heart, now tainted with doubt. Everything blurred, as if an invisible hand was twisting reality out of shape. Elena, my daughter-in-law, had always appeared the perfect wife and devoted mother. I believed that. I truly did. But now, every memory of her felt like a betrayal. I remembered one day she came back late from the market, face glowing, hugging Caleb tightly. But another time, after being out, she returned irritable, snapping about the salt not being in its place, eyes blazing. I dismissed it as mood swings. But today, things began to unravel. I recalled Elena sitting at the kitchen table, writing a shopping list with her right hand, her handwriting neat, straight. The next day, I caught her jotting something down with her left hand messy, almost like someone else's writing. I asked, "Sweetheart, this handwriting doesn't look like yours. Why was it so tidy yesterday, and now it's completely different?" She looked up and smiled, a crooked smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Mom, sometimes I like doing things the opposite way. Keeps life interesting, doesn't it?" Her answer felt light-hearted, but it chilled me to the core. I was still deep in thought when Caleb burst through the door, his backpack bouncing, eyes glowing. "Grandma," my teacher said, "I draw really well today." I stroked his hair, forcing a smile. "Yesterday, Mom helped me with my homework," she wrote with her right hand, "and the letters were so pretty. But today, she used her left hand, and it's messier." He held up 2 notebook pages. One side was neatly written, the other a scrawl. I swallowed hard. "Maybe Mom was just tired today, sweetheart." Caleb tilted his head, eyes full of innocent confusion. "Grandma, Mom's been acting weird. Sometimes she hugs me and calls me Caleb, but other times she calls me Martin. I'm not Martin, am I?" I froze, my heart pounded. Martin? There had never been a Martin in our family. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mrs. Collins, our longtime neighbor, standing beneath the awning, holding a plate, the very one Elena had brought over the day before. She smiled, but her eyes were thoughtful. "Evelyn, your daughter-in-law is stunning." But yesterday, when she handed me the plate, her hand was shaking, and her eyes, they were strange, cold, like she didn't recognize me. "Didn't you say she's right-handed?" "Well, she gave me the plate with her left." I managed a smile and invited her in for tea, but my stomach was turning. It wasn't just me, the neighbors had begun noticing something off too. Later that evening, I went into the garden. The rain had stopped, but the ground remained damp, the scent of wet grass hanging in the air. I watered the aging chrysanthemums, but my hands trembled, the water splashing erratically. In my mind, voices tumbled like pebbles dropped into a pond. Caleb's words, Lucas's voice, Mrs. Collins's observation, each ripple growing wider, refusing to fade. I asked myself, have I grown too old to recognize the strange in my own home? Or have I been willfully blind, clinging to the illusion of a perfect family? Elena returned. Her rain-soaked coat clung to her frame, her hair disheveled, eyes slightly sunken. In her hand was a dark fabric tote, soaked and heavy as though carrying a secret. I noticed she held it with her left hand, not her usual right. "What did you get from the store, Elena?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She hesitated, then smiled a forced, uneven smile. "Tomatoes, cilantro, fresh fish. I'll make your favorite dish tonight." I nodded, eyes locked on her hands. Left, then right. What were those hands hiding? Dinner passed beneath flickering fluorescent light. The wind howled through the door, cracks like someone crying in the distance. Nathan, exhausted from work, still managed a smile for Caleb. Elena ate slowly, calmly, occasionally reminding him, "Don't forget parent-teacher night next week. Make sure to ask for the day off." Her voice husky, sharp, a complete contrast to the gentle tone she usually used. I shivered. Was this truly the same Elena I'd come to know? I sat there, under dim lights, listening to the clink of spoons on plates. Inside, it felt like an invisible hand was gripping my throat. Could it be that two women wore the same face but not the same soul? That night, it rained. The rain fell in heavy, hollow drops onto the corrugated roof, casting a dim yellow glow from the streetlight onto the narrow alley. I stood beneath the awning, wrapped in a thick, worn-out gray coat. It was heavy, but not warm. Raindrops clung to my shoulders like icy thoughts clinging to my mind. I pulled out my phone, my voice rough and breaking. "Carol, can we meet tonight? Same place as always. I can't talk about this at home." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then Carol's voice came through, still warm, but laced with a firm edge. "Evelyn, your face says it all. I've never seen you tremble like this. Say it before it swallows you whole." I stepped into the small bar at the end of the alley, a place Carol and I once haunted in our youth, dreaming of love, marriage, and the futures we hoped to build. Now, it was thick with dust and secrets. The lighting was dim, flickering from an old oil lamp on a cracked marble table, casting reflections in the dark red wine that looked like thinned blood. A somber jazz tune groaned from the aging speakers, as if echoing the chaos in my chest. I picked a shadowed corner, sank into a heavy leather chair, and gripped a steaming cup of strong black tea, clutching it like it was the last thread of truth I still held. But inside, I was as cold as the rain outside. Carol arrived, wearing a light sweater, a bag of fresh vegetables in her hand, still the same friend from years ago, but her eyes had changed, sharper, wiser, the gaze of someone who had witnessed far too many lies. She sat down without pleasantries. "Tell me, what made you choose a place this gloomy to confide in? And why do your eyes look like someone who just lost a piece of her family?" I drew a deep breath. Each word scraped my throat like gravel. I told her about the call from Lucas, the woman in first class who looked just like Elena, the passport dropped at the gate, the subtle behavioral shifts, the change in dominant hand, the unfamiliar tone in her voice, Caleb's unease, the cold stare from my daughter-in-law. From my bag, I pulled out an old leather-bound notebook, frayed and tied with worn cloth like a secret dossier. I slid it across to Carol. "This, every detail, each word feels like a dagger. Carol, I don't know if I'm still sane." Carol opened the notebook, flipping through each page. In the lamplight, my trembling handwriting looked like dried blood on paper. Her expression darkened. Then she said, "You've seen it now, Evelyn. And you're right. Every time she comes back, she's someone else. What do you think this means?" "Ah!" I shook my head, my hands trembling as they wrapped around the wine glass. "I don't know. I'm just afraid. Afraid that Elena is hiding something horrifying. Afraid that if I dig too deep, this family will explode. But I can't pretend anymore. I need to know the truth. For Nathan, for Caleb." Carol set the notebook down, her voice sharp like a freshly honed blade. "You don't have the luxury of doubt anymore. If you ignore this, your family will fall apart right before your eyes." I said nothing. The rain grew heavier. Droplets smacked against the window pane, swirling into spirals like my thoughts. "But what if I'm wrong?" I whispered. What if I'm accusing her unfairly? What if I end up hurting Nathan? Carol didn't hesitate. No, Evelyn, you're not accusing. You're responding with a mother's intuition. And if you don't investigate, you'll live in the dark forever. Suddenly, the door creaked open. A man stepped in. Soaked from the rain, it was the familiar postman from the neighborhood. He shook the water off his coat and, by chance, caught sight of me. "Oh, Mrs. Brooks, what a coincidence. I saw your daughter-in-law at the post office early this morning." She looked strangely rushed, holding a thick stack of documents. I was going to say hello, but she left in a hurry. I froze. The post office? Documents? Rushing? Carol looked at me silently. Her eyes said everything. After the postman left, I sat in silence. My heart felt like it was being dragged underwater. Carol reached out and took my icy hand. "See, Evelyn, it's not just you. Strangers, neighbors, they're all noticing something's off. Stop lying to yourself. Write it down. Keep going. And if needed, follow her. Not to hurt, but to protect." I nodded, stiffly, like a puppet on strings. The wine glass in front of me now held only a faded red streak, like blood smeared across the final page of a diary. I left the bar in the rain. The cold wind pierced through my hair and into my skull. I had spent my life building this home. And now, I was about to do the most brutal thing of all: investigate someone from within my own family. The sky darkened. Thick clouds swallowed the last of the afternoon light. Thunder rumbled in the distance, soft but deep enough to make the entire house tremble in the silence. The dim twilight filtered through the kitchen window, casting streaks of dull red across the walls like blurred stains of dried blood. I sat by the wooden table near the window, the amber lamp turned low, illuminating the worn leather journal before me. Its pages had yellowed with time, edges curled like whispers of stories too old to retell. Each tick of the grandfather clock struck my chest like a warning bell. Every passing second carved deeper into the knot of suspicion tightening in my gut. 3 p.m. Elena slipped on her coat, clutching that familiar brown leather handbag. Her voice, gentle but distant, carried a strange hollowness, as if programmed not to touch any real emotion. "Mom, I'm heading out for a bit. I might be late. Don't wait for dinner." I nodded, forcing a smile. But the moment the iron gate clanged shut behind her, I bent down, opened my journal, and wrote, 15. Elena left the house, carried brown leather bag, calm tone, said she'd be late. I didn't return to the sofa. I sat at the table, eyes fixed on the gate outside. No rain yet, but a silent storm churned inside me. I counted every minute. The clock struck with haunting rhythm. With each movement of the second hand, I felt myself inching closer to a truth I wasn't ready to face. 6 p.m. The gate creaked open. Elena returned not with the brown leather bag, but a dark floral tote, damp with rain droplets, though the streets outside were dry. What struck me first wasn't the bag. It was the unfamiliar perfume she wore, strong, sweet, and foreign. Not the soft soap scent she usually favored. I waited for her to speak, and she did too quickly, too rehearsed. "Oh, the old bag gave out. Someone I know lent me this one, just for now." Her voice faltered, eyes averted, fingers clutching the bag too tightly like it hid something fragile or dangerous. I nodded, stone-faced. As she went upstairs, I turned back to the table. My hands trembled as I picked up the pen. Ink bled across the paper, pooling into dark stains. 18:3. Elena returned, holding unfamiliar fabric bag, damp with rain, but weather dry. Voice rushed, gaze evasive, strange perfume noted. Each line I wrote cut deeper into my soul. I once, a mother who believed in love, who trusted the kind eyes of her daughter-in-law, was now transforming into a silent investigator, peeling back the soft skin of a truth long rotting beneath the surface. I remained still. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering brittle leaves across the yard. I stared at the floral tote Elena had left near the kitchen. To anyone else, it was just a bag. But to me, it was a silent witness. Then came the knock, soft but deliberate. I opened the gate to find Mrs. Lynn, the neighbor from across the street. "Evelyn, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but this afternoon I passed through the West Shopping District. I saw your daughter-in-law standing outside a pharmacy. She wasn't buying anything, just talking to someone in a car. Then she left quickly. I thanked her, smiling as though she'd just shared harmless gossip. But inside, my chest felt like it had caved in. Same hour. No groceries, no rain, and now, someone else entirely. That evening, the family gathered for dinner. Elena chatted casually about vegetable prices. Caleb chirped about his school day. Nathan, as usual, stayed quiet, but I heard none of it. All I could hear was the ticking of the grandfather clock echoing from the corner of the room, sounding less like time passing and more like a countdown. Each tick, one step closer to the cold truth. Late afternoon. The wind whispered warnings through the cracks in the windows. The sky in the west darkened as thick clouds rolled in, pressing down on the rooftops like the weight of an unseen threat. The air was heavy and brittle, as if a thunderstorm or something far more sinister was silently gathering inside me. Nathan had left early for an urgent project, and Caleb was away at his weekend class meeting. The house was eerily quiet. Just me and Elena, the woman I once trusted as family. Now the very person whose presence made my heart race like prey, sensing its predator. I was wiping down the dining table, keeping my hands busy to stop my thoughts from spiraling, when Elena descended the stairs. She wore a light beige coat, a delicate scarf around her neck, and carried a black leather bag. Her face had a touch of subtle makeup, but her eyes, they never once met mine. "Mom, I have to step out for a bit. I'll be back before dinner," she said, her tone flat. Neither warm nor distant, just cold, like a recorded message on repeat. I nodded, but the moment the gate clicked shut behind her, an inner voice screamed, "Follow her, Evelyn. Go now, or you'll never know the truth." I threw on a charcoal gray cloak, wrapped a scarf over my head, and stepped out. Every step I took felt like entering a different world, one where a mother leaves the safety of what she knows to walk straight into a realm of doubt and fear. I kept my distance, silent. The wind howled through the alley of old buildings, slamming iron doors against stone walls. The sound dragged me into the reality of my aging body, unsteady legs, a fragile heart, but I kept walking. For Nathan, for Caleb. Elena didn't head toward the market like she usually did. She turned left, entering a deserted street lined with shuttered shops, faded signs, and rain-stained sidewalks. She went deeper, into an old apartment complex, where creaky wooden stairs echoed under her steps, and the scent of dampness mixed with the distant cries of children like a scene from another dimension. I ducked behind an electrical pole, breath held, heart pounding like war drums. Then Elena stopped at a rusted iron door with a tattered red curtain swaying above it like a warning flag. She knocked 3 times. The door creaked open. She stepped inside. I froze, trembling, as if a part of me had just shattered. What is she doing here? Who is behind that door? I wanted to run up and knock, confront her, but I couldn't move. It felt like my soul had been nailed to the ground, because if I took one more step, I might not be the same person anymore. I turned back, unsure how long I had wandered. The wind was fierce now, lashing my face, but I felt nothing. My mind was fixated on the image of Elena disappearing behind that door. But the true nightmare began when I opened our front gate. Elena was in the kitchen. Her back faced me. She was slicing carrots. One thud after another, thunk, 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 each one ringing like a death knell. She wore a dark, neat business outfit, hair tied back perfectly. She looked like she had just returned from an office. No beige coat, no leather bag, no sign she had ever stepped into that rundown complex. She looked up. Her eyes were sharp, her voice cold, metallic. "Where did you go, Mom? I noticed you weren't home." I stood frozen. My hand fell limp by my side. I just went for a walk," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper, throat dry as sand. She nodded, turned back to her chopping. But the eyes I saw were not Elena's. They belonged to someone else, another soul, another entity. I fled to my room, clutching the staircase rail. My legs shook so violently I had to pause midway just to breathe. Once inside, I locked the door, slumped against the cold wooden panel, and slowly sank to the floor. Cold sweat trickled down my spine. My eyes landed on the old leather journal sitting on my desk, the only thing keeping me grounded in sanity. I opened it, flipped through old notes, timestamps, small observations, and then, hand shaking, added one more entry. 5:42 p.m. Elena appeared in the kitchen. Outfit completely changed. No time to return from previous location. Cannot be explained through normal logic. I sat there for a long time, the dim glow of sunset fading through the window. And I knew. The door I feared the most, I had already opened it. The wind howled through the window panes, slapping the dusty glass until the streetlight outside flickered like a ghost. I sat alone in an old armchair, knitting needle in hand, though the yarn had long stopped moving. I wasn't knitting anymore. I was merely holding on to the last habit that made my world feel familiar, before everything I knew began to unravel. Caleb rushed into the room, his cheeks rosy from playing outside, his eyes puffy and frightened. "Grandma," Mommy yelled at me, just because I dropped a pencil. Before I could respond, he wrapped his arms around my legs, his voice quivering, on the verge of tears. "But yesterday, she was so nice. She hugged me, Grandma. I want the mommy from yesterday." I pulled Caleb close. The ache in my chest tightened like an invisible fist, twisting deeper. I whispered, "Maybe Mommy's just tired. Don't be sad." But even I didn't believe my own words anymore. Tears welled up not because Caleb cried, but because I had begun to accept a terrifying truth. Maybe the mommy from yesterday and the one today weren't the same person. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while the rain drummed a slow, sorrowful beat on the roof, a funeral march for the truth creeping ever closer. My mind played scenes like a slow-motion horror film. Elena in a beige coat entering a dark alley. Elena in the kitchen, slicing vegetables with a cold, gleaming knife. And Lucas's voice echoing, "She's sitting in first class with a strange man." I couldn't bear it anymore. Silently, I opened my drawer and pulled out the old leather diary, the page still marked by a red ribbon. My hands trembled as I wrote the next line. Maybe they're not the same person. That sentence felt like a curse. Once written, there was no turning back. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy with ash-colored clouds. I took the family portrait off the wall, where Elena stood smiling between Nathan and Caleb. That smile now sent a chill down my spine. I clutched the frame and left the house. I returned to the alley near the cemetery, where I'd once seen Elena vanish behind a rusted door. The street signs hung crooked, rusted iron flaking like skin. The air reeked of mildew, and a dog barked in the distance, as if the neighborhood itself whispered secrets no one dared speak. I stopped at a small corn stall, where a middle-aged woman was fanning charcoal. The smoke stung my eyes. I held out the photo and asked hoarsely, "Have you seen this woman around here before?" The woman squinted at the picture, then nodded and pointed to an old house. "Number 14. She's come by several times, always alone. House No. 14. Its walls were stained yellow, the metal door bent, and the red curtains fluttered in shreds like warning flags. A pot of withered daisies sat on the windowsill, drooping like a witness to something about to fall apart. I stepped forward and knocked. Each knock pounded against my chest like a hammer. Click. The door creaked open. I froze. Standing before me was Elena, or someone who looked exactly like her. Long black hair, the same face, the same build. But the eyes, those eyes were different. Lost, trembling, carrying a sorrow far too vast for Elena. She held a candle, hot wax dripping down her fingers, yet she didn't flinch. The flickering flame cast shadows across her pale cheeks, like a ghost trying to hide in the light. "Elena," I whispered, my voice breaking. She flinched, clutching the candle tightly, about to slam the door. But a second voice rose from inside the house, soft but steady. "Elena, stop running. You know this is wrong." I turned to see a young woman step out of the shadows. Her hair was neatly tied, glasses perched on her nose, dressed in a worn white shirt. Her eyes were sharp but weary. "My name is Lucy Miller. I've witnessed this for far too long. Mrs. Brooks, you deserve to know the truth." "Right?" I stepped inside. The tin roof overhead creaked. The stained walls were damp, and the cracked cement floor smelled of antiseptic and decay. In the corner, an old man wheezed under a threadbare blanket. A wall clock ticked, each second stretched into a quiet agony. Lucy offered me a seat. The woman Elena now introduced herself as someone else. She sat across from me in a tattered brown dress, her hair unkempt, her eyes swollen with exhaustion. Her hands shook, but she no longer looked away. "Please don't misunderstand. I'm not the person you think I am. My name is Elena, but it's never truly felt like mine." I sat in stunned silence, each word pierced like a needle to the skin. Lucy began to explain. Years ago, Elena met the real Evelyn at the market. They looked nearly identical. Evelyn asked her to pretend to be her, sometimes go to the market, take care of the child, come home on time so Evelyn could be free to do other things. At first, Elena said no, but her adoptive parents were both sick. Medicine wasn't going to wait. She wasn't the mastermind. She was just a pawn. I asked, my voice choking. You. Then, when you were in my house, where was the real Evelyn? What was she doing?" Elena lowered her eyes. A tear rolled onto her candlelit hands. "I don't know. She never told me. She just said, 'Do what I say, and I'll pay you.'" Silence. The room seemed to freeze. Lucy whispered, "I once saw the real Evelyn with a wealthy man. They called each other darling. His name was Charles Thompson." Charles Thompson. The name hit like a blade to the chest. The room spun. My ears rang. The clock ticking, the rain returning, the ache in my chest all fused into a storm. Lucas had told me. First class. A stranger. A secret lover. A script. And I had been the final puppet, still unaware I was being played. I stood. No tears fell. Only a cold wave rushed down my spine, piercing through bone and anchoring in my heart. "I don't blame you, Elena, but I need the truth. I have to protect Nathan and Caleb." Elena nodded, sobbing. "I'm sorry. Please don't hate me." Lucy placed a hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Brooks, she had no other choice." I stepped back into the night. The rain lashed my face like whips. The streetlight flickered, casting reflections in the puddle below, two identical faces staring back. One real, one fake. But deep inside, I knew. The one who betrayed my family, who was still out there. Late afternoon. Thick clouds streaked across the Seattle sky like strokes of black paint. The air around SeaTac Airport carried a strange chill, as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to witness the outcome of a game that had been unfolding in silence for years. I stepped into the biting wind, raising the collar of my coat. My small suitcase rolled behind me, its wheels scraping faintly against the cold gray tiles. My heart beat slow and heavy, as if each thump marked a step closer to both truth and betrayal. Nathan had sent me a message earlier. "Mom, we'll pick you up. Araceli and I just landed." The words were brief, impersonal. There was no warmth, no concern, not even a hint that I was the mother who had raised him for 30 years. I stood beside column 14 inches, the domestic arrivals terminal, where yellow light spilled across the polished floor. It cast a dim reflection of me, a mother, a woman, and now a silent witness to a slow, deliberate retaliation. A black SUV pulled up. The back door swung open. Araceli stepped out first, just like always. She wore a beige trench coat, elegant and crisp, and pulled along a sleek, expensive black handbag. Gone was the girlish yellow floral dress. Gone was the soft scarf. She now stood before me as a cold, sharp, calculating woman. Nathan followed behind her. He looked worn down, hollow. His eyes met mine but didn't really see me. Just a nod as if I were some familiar stranger he barely remembered. "You're back, Mom?" Nathan asked. His voice wasn't warm nor was it cold. It was simply empty. "I am," I replied, keeping my tone steady. But inside my coat pocket, my fingers clutched the black notebook, the one I had filled during the days I trailed Araceli. The clues, the alleys, the rusted metal doors with torn red curtains. Every page of it was here. "Let me carry your bag." "No need." I shook my head, my eyes locked on Araceli. She smiled, her lips curling like the edge of a blade. "Did you enjoy your trip?" I met her gaze directly. "Very much." I saw things I had never noticed before. For a split second, brief, almost imperceptible, her eyes flickered, as though I had touched a part of her that wasn't meant to be touched. "That's wonderful," she said, then turned to Nathan. "Let's go, sweetheart. Looks like it's about to rain." I stepped into the back seat. Nathan got behind the wheel, Araceli in the passenger seat. The car was filled with silence. Outside, rain began to fall. Slow, cold, deliberate drops. I slid my hand back into my pocket, feeling the coarse leather of the journal, and whispered to myself, "It's time, Evelyn. No more silence. The game begins right where they thought you'd be the weakest." Raindrops tapped against the car windows. Each one felt like a drumbeat, marking the beginning of the truth finally rising to the surface. After that stormy winter night, my home fell into an eerie stillness. Wind slipped through every crack in the walls, and the creaking wooden doors blended with the dry tick of the grandfather clock, as if marking the fractures deep within my heart. The living room, once filled with Caleb's laughter and Nathan's endless stories, was now dimly lit by a flickering yellow bulb, casting shadows across the cracked wooden chairs. A crooked family photo hung on the wall, and the jagged fracture running through it mirrored the very fault lines now splitting this family. I had spent a lifetime building this home, this sanctuary. Yet in that moment, I stood like a lone survivor after a devastating storm, surrounded by the wreckage of a world I once carefully constructed. Elena had walked out, her parting words laced with venom. Nathan watched her leave with vacant eyes, and Caleb burst into tears, his sobs cutting through the heavy air like broken glass. I knew then everything had changed forever. A week later, Nathan and Elena finalized their divorce at the courthouse. I didn't go. When Nathan came home, he spoke in a hollow tone, as though life had been drained from his spirit. "Mom," he said quietly. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Caleb. She signed the papers faster than she breathed. Then she walked away hand in hand with that man, like we had never meant anything to her. I sat beside him, gripping his hand tightly in mine. From the kitchen, the tea kettle boiled over, steam hissing as it met the flame like my pain, bubbling over, unstoppable. Elena never once asked for custody of Caleb, as if he were just a role she was done playing. My heart broke, not only for Nathan but for Caleb, a 7-year-old boy abandoned so cruelly. I steadied my voice. "Nathan, this house still stands. I'm still here. Caleb will grow up in the arms of love. One person walking away cannot drain this home of all the love that lives here." Nathan didn't answer. My son had grown increasingly silent. He spent hours in the same old chair Gabriel once favored, slowly twisting his wedding ring between his fingers like he was trying to loosen a memory. Then one day, without a word, he slipped off the ring, placed it on the table, and walked into his room. In that moment, I saw a shadow of Gabriel in his eyes, the quiet sorrow of a man who knew he had run out of time. And then, Elena arrived. Not the one who left Elena, the other one. A quiet, gentle presence. She came by every day, carrying a dented metal lunchbox that radiated warmth and love. She sat on the floor with Caleb, coloring, building puzzles, gently wiping his tears when he asked, "Elena, where did my real mom go?" I looked at her. Her face was strikingly similar to Elena's, but her eyes revealed a completely different heart, tender, patient, and sincere. One afternoon, I watched as Caleb ran up and wrapped his arms around her, giggling, "Elena, can you help me paint the sunshine yellow so the birds can fly?" My heart clenched. My eyes blurred as she laughed softly and replied, "Of course, sweetheart. But don't forget to paint a big sky too so the bird has somewhere to come home to." That day, Caleb painted for a long time. When I quietly approached him, I saw his drawing. 2 sets of arms wrapped around him, one faded and blurry, the other vibrant and clear. I didn't need to ask. I understood. On the altar, Gabriel's old photo looked down on us with a kind gaze, as if blessing his son and grandson. The candle beside it had burned halfway, wax dripping like silent grief, marking the quiet erosion of a once strong family. One morning, I watched Caleb run into the yard, holding a paper kite. The wind picked up, lifting the kite before it tumbled down. Elena rushed to retrieve it, grasping Caleb's hand. They both laughed. In that sound, I heard something small but unbreakable, the first breath of rebirth. I turned back inside and stood by the foggy window. With a fingertip, I traced the word hope, then wiped it away when I heard Nathan sigh behind me. I didn't blame him. Time was still moving, and every wound needs time to heal. And then, as Caleb watered the concrete edge of the yard, I saw it a green shoot, sprouting from a crack. I stood there, heart tight in my chest, and whispered, "Sometimes, it's through the cracks that life begins again." It was a quiet evening, with a gentle rain tapping softly on the roof, like the deep, steady breath of a house that had witnessed far too much sorrow. The wind swept across the porch, and the warm, golden light from the living room stretched long shadows across the wooden floor, as if the space itself was holding its breath. I was drying the last teacup in the kitchen when Nathan called out, "Mom, could you come out here for a moment?" I stepped into the living room, and what I saw took my breath away. My son, Nathan, stood in the center of the room, hands trembling as he held an old ring. It wasn't just any ring, it was Gabriel's wedding ring. The family heirloom my late husband wore with pride, the one Nathan had safeguarded for years like a sacred memory. Standing beside him was Elena, cheeks flushed, eyes glistening, gaze filled with both hope and fear. Nathan slowly lowered himself to one knee, his silhouette stretching across the floor, as though enveloping Elena in a quiet embrace under the soft light. His voice was low, thick with emotion. "Elena, I've lost everything once before. But you brought me and Caleb back from the dark. I don't want to wait another moment. Will you walk this life with me not only as my wife, but as Caleb's true mother and as the light of this family?" Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks as she turned to look at me, as if seeking my final blessing. I stepped forward, gently placing my hand over hers, which was trembling in Nathan's grip, and softly said, "My dear, this hand has mended what was torn in this home. You deserve this ring not because you're joining our family now, but because you've already been a part of it for a long time." She broke into sobs and wrapped her arms around me. In that moment, I knew healing had truly begun. The wedding took place in a small chapel on the outskirts of town. The wooden arches soared gracefully overhead, and soft sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting shimmering rainbows onto the stone floor. It was not extravagant, but radiant in its simplicity. Rows of sunflowers lined the aisle, symbols of hope and light. Caleb wore a tiny suit, skipping down the aisle with colorful ribbons in his hands, tossing them into the air. His laughter echoed through the church, blending with the soft ringing of the bells. Lucas had flown back from his assignment and stood proudly beside Nathan, his eyes sparkling with the same excitement he had when he first put on his pilot's uniform. I sat in the front pew, my tears no longer born of grief, but of quiet joy. When Nathan slipped his father's ring onto Elena's finger, the chapel fell silent. A single candle burned on the altar. After his vows, Nathan leaned forward and blew it out, symbolizing the end of one chapter and the sacred beginning of another. Life after the wedding settled into a quiet, meaningful rhythm. The apartment balcony was filled with blooming lavender. Each evening, golden streetlights spilled softly onto the walls as I sat in my wooden chair, listening to the neighbor's guitar floating up from below. Inside, the sounds of family life filled the air. Elena humming lullabies to Caleb, Nathan flipping through project files, their laughter mingling in a melody of peace. Elena never sought luxury. She never bought expensive things, but every meal she cooked was seasoned with love. She sang lullabies to Caleb, songs Nathan once heard from me when he was small, binding 3 generations together through the warmth of familiar melodies. "Mom, can I draw a bird flying into the sky?" Caleb once asked. "Of course," I said, "but make sure it's a strong bird, because I believe it will soar far and never be left behind." Caleb never asked about his biological mother anymore. He now called Elena Mom, with a smile so bright it lit up the room. As for Nathan, he shared his plans with Elena every night. She would listen intently, holding a chipped blue teacup in her hand, always placing it carefully beside him, as though cradling every tender moment. That night, I sat alone on the balcony. The breeze gently swayed the lavender stems, and moonlight glowed softly on my hand as I held an old photo of Gabriel, the man who taught me to trust in truth. I looked through the window. Their shadows cast softly on the wall, 3 figures now, perfectly aligned. A new one had joined the 2 older ones. Elena placed the cup beside Nathan and kissed his forehead. Caleb was playing with a paper airplane, humming the same lullaby. I smiled, whispering to the night, "Do you see this, Gabriel? We lost so much, but in the end, we found our light again. Truth may tear the heart, but it also stitches it back together with the thread of love." The story you've just heard may have had its names and setting changed, but the pain and the lesson within it are all too real for countless families out there. We don't share these stories to cast blame, but to shine a light on what so many mothers, grandmothers, and wives silently endure right within their own homes. And so I ask you, if one day you found yourself in my shoes, what would you choose? Would you remain silent to preserve a false sense of peace? Or would you gather the courage to face the truth and reclaim your voice to protect the ones you love? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, because sometimes a single honest comment can become a guiding light for someone who feels lost. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so that more people can receive this message. And right here on the screen, I've left 2 of our most loved stories. I truly believe they'll move you and leave you with much to reflect on. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Remember this: the truth may hurt, but only the truth can set us free.